let's talk about Trump-Russia sanctions for a bit. Trump-Russia sanctions. So Donald Trump has been talking about red lines with the Russians for quite a bit now. He's put forward 7 red lines, all of which have been crossed, none of which got responses. He put out red lines that were organized by himself exclusively. He put up red lines that were organized with the Europeans so he could do coordinated sanctions responses. None of these led to anything. The Russians barreled forward, and the consensus was that the Russians continued to move forward because they felt no resistance. And if Russians are not going to feel any resistance, any consequences, why are they going to stop? Why are they going to sign the ceasefire? And this continued until eventually Trump abandoned the idea of a ceasefire entirely. And they talked about sanctions, they talked about actions, until eventually, not too long ago, Donald Trump pulled the trigger on their first real significant sanctions of the war, which was on India and on Russian energy giants like Lukoil and Rosneft. Now, what this meant was that India became one of the most sanctioned countries in the world to the United States. The average rate for America's sanctions globally right now is about 25%. India moved up to 50%. So that was quite a significant impact. India responded quite negatively to this, saying, how could you do this to me? China continues to trade with the Russians on energy. They continue to buy Russian energy at a discount. And yes, that fuels the war. I mean, they don't say, yes, that fuels the war effort. Yes, that fuels the war effort, but they do it too. And hell, many European countries continue to import Russian energy product. For example, Slovakia. Another example, Hungary. Hell, many European states continue to import these products, some of them through third parties, even though these avenues continue to get narrower and narrower. But in Hungary's example, they actually are widening the avenue. In Hungary's example, they got an exemption from the United States so that they continue to import Russian energy because Viktor Orban is a political ally of Donald Trump. And so, again, from the Indians, that's hypocritical. That doesn't make any sense. And when 60% of Indians view Vladimir Putin favorably, the majority of Indians are not very pro-Ukraine. It's just the truth. The majority of Indians, due to India's history with Russia and the Soviet Union's history in recognizing its territorial sovereignty and conflicts with Pakistan, its history and not really shutting down India and condemning them after they did nuclear tests, like the West did, and saying that, India is, I guess, an atomic country now. This backing of each other up, as well as India buying up so much Russian weapons, like 60% of their weapons arsenal is of Russian origin. And so if they need spare parts, if they need new components, they're going to have to get that from the Russians. They also want to cooperate with the Russians when it comes to atomic energy. And the Russians need laborers. They have a labor shortage, which is widely reported. And so they also were able to, in a recent meeting, negotiate some more Indian workers coming over. So they have a relationship that they want to maintain irrespective of these sanctions, which at first New Delhi, did resist, and they're continuing to protest, but they did decrease their Russian energy imports. Indian Russian energy imports are at a 4-year low right now. And this is in the aftermath of these sanctions being placed. So they did have an effect. But in the aftermath of the sanctions being placed, Vladimir Putin went to India and had a meeting with Narendra Modi. And in this meeting with Narendra Modi, they agreed to increase trade between the two countries to $100 billion. Now, to be blunt with you, if you look at Russian trade with India, the vast majority of it is export energy product. So as long as the United States sanctions that export energy product and possibly even continues to increase sanctions, if we go to 60% or 70 or 75%, if that knob continues to turn up, that could be a significant problem. And there are other other industries that they could trade in. But the main thing that that India needs is energy. India is in an energy deficit. They need more energy, and they constantly need more energy. And so Narendra Modi's solution to this was to import both Russian energy, but now that Donald Trump's gotten in office, he wants to import more and more American energy as well. Not just because of Donald Trump getting in office, but trying to convince the president of the United States not to sanction him further, or to remove those sanctions, or to not give him further, further problems economically. He's trying to maintain this balancing act between East and West, but it's delicate. But through that balancing act, he is also trying to feed the Indian energy giant, which is the fact that they just need tons and tons of energy for their population. So India is decreasing energy imports, but at the same time, it is putting a very public facing, like a very stoic public face forward. They're not showing weakness when it comes to presenting with Putin publicly. They're agreeing to migrant labor transfers. They're agreeing to agreements towards, atomic energy. They're agreeing towards $100 billion trade deals. But the big thing is that Donald Trump put forward these sanctions. The purpose was to hurt Russian energy companies. And those energy companies have decreased their exports to India. The question is whether or not India is going to continue to decrease those exports or keep them at a lower rate, or they're going to reverse. I think they're going to probably try to hold course now and see if they can sway the president towards them on them being able to import Russian energy, or hopefully last until some cessation of hostilities. But if not, I don't think eventually Modi's going to let go of Putin. It is true that the United States has more economic power, and we can, if we wanted to, probably get them to get off of more and more Russian oil. I'm not saying it's impossible that they could say no. I'm just saying that the pain would be substantive enough that the Indians would have many, many more motivations to do it. But the Indians want to keep their maneuverable, flexible diplomatic position. The Indians have feuding with the Chinese, but also been able to balance with the Chinese on some issues like in BRICS. They like being able to work with the Russians on this and being able to import cheap fuel, cheap energy. They like being able to get, trade from the United States, but also technological investment, different, programs, back and forth between the two countries. They want that, but they want it all. They don't just want one or the other. They like the non-alignment that has allowed them to kind of balance between these two countries. They like being their own pole of power that can work with all these different countries. And so they want to maintain that. If Trump was to squeeze harder, I think that balancing act would become more difficult, but it would probably lean more on the Russians getting to export less fuel to India. The question is, will Donald Trump continue to increase the pressure, or is he just looking for a quick out to this war, and he isn't willing to take all the steps necessary to make the Russians concede on not occupying land they don't currently control? Also, I do want to put forward another reason that I don't think that Narendra Modi and Putin are going to back off of each other is that Russian TV, their propaganda for Putin and India and Modi being friends and being in the limo is all cool and everything. But Indian propaganda has been much more successful at convincing me. One second. Let me see if I can pull this up. I actually have a clip. I think I forgot to set it up before stream. I'll set it up now. Here it is. ये दोस्ती हम नहीं तोड़ेंगे, मुश्किलें आए मगर तेरा साथ ना छोड़ेंगे. अरे तेरा हाथ मेरा हाथ, मेरा हाथ तेरा हाथ कभी भी आजमाना. टैनेट कोई लगाए S400 ना रोक पाए अपना ये याराना. दोस्ती So they've convinced me. They're gonna stand their ground. They have convinced me. But I need to get something to drink, so I will play first the Steve Rosenberg section,